Standing outside the grocery store, I was trying to manage my 2 children when my oldest son Eric suddenly let go of my hand and ran. My heart jumped into my throat because he was heading straight toward a man unlocking an expensive black car. The stranger wore a dark suit, had piercing gray eyes, and his face held an expression that suggested the world meant nothing to him. I knew immediately this was the wrong person for my son to approach. Eric clasped his hands together in front of the tall stranger and said, "Uncle, uncle, please be my papa. Just for today. Please." I rushed toward them as fast as I could. "Eric, no, stop." Panic filled my voice. But the man crouched down, got on one knee and looked into Eric's innocent eyes. Then he shifted his gaze to me, and in that moment it felt like someone had touched my soul. His eyes were cold, but there was something in them beyond fear. There was power there, control. "What's your name?" he asked Eric in a completely serious tone. "Eric, and this is my little brother Leo. And that's my papa. That's Jaden." Eric pointed at me with embarrassment and my entire face burned hot. The stranger stood up, and I saw his full height for the first time. Over 6 feet tall, broad shoulders, a muscular build that was visible even through his expensive suit. His face was sharp, handsome, but completely emotionless. "Is your ex coming?" he asked me directly, as if he already knew everything. I could only nod. Yes. Words wouldn't come to my tongue. The man reached inside his jacket, pulled out his phone, typed something, then turned the screen toward me. Written on it was, "Tell me his name. I'll make sure he never bothers you again." My heart grew heavy. Fear was there but also relief. Before I could respond, he straightened his coat and looked at Eric. "All right. For today I'll be your papa." Eric's eyes lit up with joy, and Leo started clapping. I just stood there, wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life or the best decision. That's when I heard a voice from behind. "Jaden." Hearing that voice made my entire body freeze. My ex, Tristan. I turned around and there he stood, drunken eyes and that smile that always terrified me. But suddenly the stranger placed his hand on my shoulder. The grip was firm, possessive. "What's your business here?" he asked Tristan in a cold and menacing tone. For the first time I watched Tristan fall silent in front of me, because the cold power radiating from this man's face was more dangerous than any fire. At that moment I thought, who is this man? The stranger didn't wait for Tristan's answer. He simply guided us toward his car with one hand still on my shoulder as if marking his territory. Leo grabbed my other hand and Eric walked ahead excitedly. Tristan stood there, frozen in place, his usual confidence completely shattered. I glanced back once and saw the confusion and anger mixing on my ex's face. The stranger opened the back door for the children, then opened the passenger door for me. His movements were smooth, practiced, like he'd done this 1,000 times before. When I hesitated, he simply said, "Get in, Jaden." The way he said my name sent shivers down my spine. Once we were all inside, the stranger closed the doors and walked around to the driver's side. The car smelled like leather and that same expensive cologne I'd noticed earlier. Eric was bouncing in his seat, whispering excitedly to Leo. I sat rigid in the front seat, my mind racing. What had I just allowed to happen? Who was this man? Why was he helping us? The engine started with a quiet purr, and we pulled away from the parking lot. I watched in the side mirror as Tristan grew smaller and smaller until he disappeared completely. The drive was silent except for the children's whispered conversation. The stranger kept his eyes on the road, his jaw set, his hands steady on the wheel. I studied his profile, noticing the sharp line of his nose, the strength in his jawline, the way his gray eyes remained focused. There was something dangerous about him, something that made my instincts scream at me to be careful. But there was also something protective in the way he'd positioned himself between me and Tristan. I found myself wanting to trust him, even though every logical part of my brain told me not to. After about 15 minutes, we pulled into a small park. The stranger turned off the engine and finally spoke. "They need to play, to forget what just happened." His voice was deep and steady. He got out and opened the back door for Eric and Leo, who scrambled out eagerly. I followed more slowly, my legs feeling weak. The stranger walked to a nearby bench and sat down, his eyes scanning the playground where my children were already heading toward the swings. I stood there awkwardly, not sure what to do or say. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the space beside him. It wasn't a command, but it wasn't a suggestion either. I sat down, keeping a careful distance between us. We watched the children in silence for a moment. Then he spoke again. "My name is Carter." I turned to look at him. "Why are you doing this? You don't know me. You don't know them." Carter's gray eyes met mine, and I saw something flicker in their depths. "Your son asked for help. That's enough." His answer was simple, but I could sense there was more beneath the surface. "But you can't just—" I started, but he interrupted me. "Your ex? He's violent?" The question caught me off guard. I swallowed hard and nodded. "Sometimes, when he drinks, which is often now." Carter's expression didn't change, but his hands clenched slightly on his knees. "Does he have legal custody?" The question hit too close to home. "He's trying to get it. We have a court case next month. He claims I'm unstable, that I can't provide for them properly." My voice cracked on the last word. Carter was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and handed it to me. On the screen was a contact entry with just a first name. "Carter. Save this number. If he shows up again, call me immediately." I stared at the phone, then at him. "I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm offering." His tone left no room for argument. I saved the number with shaking fingers and handed the phone back. Carter stood up and called out to Eric and Leo. "5 more minutes, then we need to get you all home safely." The children cheered and went back to playing. Carter looked down at me, and for the first time I saw the hint of a smile on his lips. It was small, barely there, but it changed his entire face. "This isn't the end, Jaden. It's just the beginning. Your ex won't stop easily. But neither will I." Then he walked toward the playground, leaving me sitting on the bench with my heart pounding and my mind full of questions. I watched him push Leo on the swing while Eric ran circles around them, laughing. In that moment, it looked so natural, so right, like we were a real family. But we weren't. This was all happening because of a desperate child's request to a stranger. Yet somehow I couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter would change everything. Carter's words echoed in my mind. This is just the beginning. What had I gotten myself into? And more importantly, why did part of me feel relieved instead of afraid? Carter drove us home in continued silence, and I gave him directions in a quiet voice. Eric and Leo had finally settled down in the back seat, their excitement fading into contentment. When we pulled up to my apartment building, I felt embarrassment wash over me. The building was old, the paint peeling in places, nothing like the expensive car we were sitting in or the polished appearance Carter presented. He turned off the engine and got out without comment, opening the back door to help the children out. His lack of judgment somehow made me feel worse. "Thank you for the ride," I said, reaching for Eric's hand. Carter looked at the building, then at me. "I'll walk you up." It wasn't a question. I wanted to protest, to tell him he'd done enough, but the memory of Tristan's face stopped me. If he'd followed us somehow, if he was waiting. "Okay," I whispered. We walked through the lobby and up 2 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken again. Carter didn't complain, just kept pace beside us. At my door, I fumbled with my keys, too aware of his presence behind me. Once inside, the children immediately ran to their room to play with their toys. I stood in the small living room, suddenly hyper-aware of the dishes I'd left in the sink that morning, the laundry basket overflowing in the corner, the way the couch cushions were worn thin. Carter's eyes swept over the apartment, but his expression remained neutral. "You live here alone with them?" he asked. "Yes. Since Tristan and I split 6 months ago." I wrapped my arms around myself. "It's not much, but it's ours. It's safe." Carter walked to the window and looked out at the street below. 3rd floor. Fire escape accessible. Single lock on the door. "Jaden, this isn't safe at all." His words stung because they were true. "It's what I can afford right now. I lost my job 2 months ago, and finding something new that works with the kids' schedule has been—" I trailed off. Why was I explaining myself to this stranger? Carter turned from the window, and something in his expression had softened slightly. "The court case. Tell me about it." I sank onto the couch. "Tristan filed for full custody. He claims I'm financially unstable and emotionally unfit. He has a good lawyer, family money behind him. I have a public defender who barely remembers my name. The words tumbled out. All the fear and frustration I'd been holding inside. Carter sat down on the chair across from me, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. What does he really want? Because this isn't about the children. The observation surprised me. How do you know? Men like him don't actually want the responsibility of raising kids. They want control. They want to punish you for leaving. Carter's voice was cold, analytical. So what does he want? I thought about it, really thought about it. He wants me back. He wants me to admit I was wrong for leaving him. He wants me to depend on him again. Carter nodded slowly. Then we give him what he expects to see, but not what he wants to have. I didn't understand, and my confusion must have shown on my face. Carter pulled out his phone and opened his camera roll, showing me several photos. They were of me and him today getting into his car, sitting together at the park bench, him with his hand on my shoulder. When had he taken these? How did you? I had a friend nearby. He's good with a camera and better at being invisible. Carter scrolled through more images. These photos show a stable relationship, a partner who can provide security and support. They show that you're not alone and struggling. My stomach dropped. You're suggesting we fake a relationship? Carter's gray eyes met mine steadily. I'm suggesting we give the court what they need to see. A stable home environment, financial security, emotional support. Everything your ex claims you lack. I stood up and walked away, my mind spinning. That's insane. That's fraud. The court will see through it. Only if we're not convincing, Carter replied calmly. And I'm very good at being convincing. I turned to face him. Why would you do this? What do you get out of helping me like this? For the first time, Carter's composure cracked slightly. He looked away and I saw pain flash across his features. I told you, your son asked for help. Let's leave it at that. But I couldn't leave it at that. No, people don't just involve themselves in strangers' custody battles out of kindness. What's the real reason? Carter stood up and the movement was so sudden I took a step back. He noticed and stopped, holding up his hands. I'm not going to hurt you, Jaden. I'm not him. His voice was gentler. The real reason? I failed someone once, someone who asked me for help, and I turned them away because I thought they were being dramatic, that they could handle it themselves. They couldn't, and now they're gone. The raw pain in his voice made my chest ache. I'm sorry, I whispered. Don't be sorry. Just let me help you. Carter moved toward the door. I'll come back tomorrow. We need to establish a pattern, make this look real. Your neighbors need to see me around. We need documentation. As he reached for the door handle, Eric and Leo came running out of their room. Uncle Carter, are you leaving? Eric asked, his face falling. Carter crouched down to Eric's level. I am, but I'll be back tomorrow. I promise. Leo hugged Carter's leg, and I saw something crack in Carter's carefully controlled expression. He gently ruffled Leo's hair before standing. Lock the door behind me. All 3 locks. I only have 1. I started. You'll have 3 by tomorrow afternoon. Carter interrupted. I'll send someone to install them. Then he was gone, and I was left standing in my apartment with my 2 children and a head full of impossible thoughts. That night, after I'd put Eric and Leo to bed, I sat alone in the dark living room thinking about everything that had happened. Carter's offer was crazy. Faking a relationship to win a custody case could backfire spectacularly if we were caught. But what choice did I have? Tristan had money, lawyers, and a vindictive streak a mile wide. I had nothing except 2 beautiful children, who deserved better than to be caught in this mess. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we start building your new life. CA stared at that message for a long time. Building a new life, with a stranger who had secrets in his eyes and scars on his soul. What could possibly go wrong? The next morning arrived too quickly. I'd barely slept, tossing and turning while thinking about Carter's proposal. Around 8 o'clock, there was a knock at my door. I looked through the peephole and saw 2 men in work uniforms carrying toolboxes. Mr. Jaden? One called through the door. Mr. Carter sent us to upgrade your locks. I let them in, feeling surreal as they immediately got to work. They didn't just add locks. They replaced my flimsy door with something heavier, installed a deadbolt, a chain lock and some kind of electronic security system. The whole process took 3 hours. When they finished, one of them handed me a small card with instructions and said, "Mr. Carter will have the secondary code for emergencies." Then they were gone. I was still processing this when Carter himself arrived around noon, carrying bags of groceries. "You didn't have to," I started, but he walked right past me into the kitchen. "When was the last time you had fresh food in this apartment?" he asked, already unpacking vegetables, fruits, meat, and what looked like an entire week's worth of supplies. Eric and Leo appeared from their room, drawn by the activity. "Uncle Carter," Eric shouted happily. Carter smiled at them, a real smile that transformed his usually stern face, and pulled out a smaller bag. "I brought something for you two as well." Inside were coloring books, crayons, and small toy cars. The children were thrilled. While Eric and Leo played with their new toys, Carter continued organizing the kitchen like he owned the place. I watched him, this mysterious man who'd inserted himself into our lives, and felt conflicted. Grateful, yes, but also worried about what this all meant. "We need to talk about boundaries," I finally said. Carter looked at me over his shoulder. "Boundaries? Yes. If we're going to do this fake relationship thing, we need rules. Clear lines about what's acceptable and what's not." Carter closed the refrigerator and turned to face me fully. "All right, what kind of rules are you thinking?" I hadn't actually thought this through. Well, like you can't just show up whenever you want. And we should have set times when you're here so the neighbors see a pattern but it's not too invasive." Carter leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "Those rules won't work." "What? Why not?" "Because we're supposed to be in a real relationship. Real couples don't have scheduled visiting hours. I need to be here enough that it looks natural, spontaneous even." He was right, and I hated that he was right. "Fine, but you're not staying overnight. That's where I draw the line." Carter's expression didn't change. "What if Tristan comes back? What if he tries something when I'm not here?" The question hung in the air between us. I thought about last night, how I'd jumped at every sound, terrified that Tristan would bang on the door drunk and angry. "Then I'll call the police," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Jaden, be realistic. By the time police arrive, he could hurt you or scare the children. I should stay here, at least for the first few weeks until we establish protection orders." Every reasonable part of my brain screamed that this was moving too fast, that inviting this stranger to live with us was insane. But the scared, exhausted part of me wanted to say yes. Wanted the security Carter offered. "Where would you even sleep?" "I have 2 bedrooms. One for the kids and one for me." Carter glanced around the small apartment. "The couch is fine. I've slept in worse places." Something about the way he said it made me curious. "What do you do, Carter?" "For work, I mean. You have money, that's obvious. But you've never said what you actually do." Carter's expression shuttered closed. "I solve problems for people who can't solve them through normal channels." "That's not an answer. That's a tagline. It's the only answer you need right now." His tone made it clear the subject was closed. I felt frustrated but decided to let it go for now. We had bigger issues to handle. "If you're going to stay here, even temporarily, Eric and Leo need to understand this is temporary. They're already getting attached to you. When this is over, when the custody case is resolved, you'll leave. I don't want them hurt." Carter's jaw tightened. "Understood. I'll make sure they know this arrangement has an expiration date." The words should have been reassuring, but instead they made me feel hollow. The rest of the day passed in a strange domestic routine. Carter made lunch for all of us. Actual healthy food, not the cheap processed meals I'd been surviving on. He played with the children while I finally caught up on laundry. He helped Eric with a picture he was coloring, showing patience I didn't expect. Several times I caught myself watching him, trying to figure out this man who'd crashed into our lives. Who was he really? What demons was he running from? Because people didn't just help strangers like this without their own wounds driving them. That evening, there was a knock at the door. I looked at Carter in panic, but he was already moving, checking the new peephole. His body language relaxed slightly. "It's okay, I know him." He opened the door to reveal another man, tall and lean with kind eyes. "Jaden, this is Marcus. He's my lawyer and he's going to be your lawyer too." Marcus came in carrying a briefcase and smiled warmly at me. Nice to meet you. Carter told me about your situation. I've already pulled the case files from the public defender's office. We need to talk strategy. For the next 2 hours, Marcus walked me through everything. He explained how Carter would be presented as my long-term partner, how we'd need testimony from neighbors, how the financial stability Carter provided would be documented. It was overwhelming and intimidating, but Marcus had a way of making it all seem possible. After Marcus left, I put the exhausted children to bed. When I came back out, Carter had made tea and was sitting on the couch. "You okay?" he asked. "I don't know. This all feels like too much, too fast. Yesterday I was alone and barely holding on. Today I have new locks, a lawyer and a fake boyfriend. It's surreal." Carter patted the couch next to him. I sat down, keeping space between us. "Jaden, I know this is strange. I know you have no reason to trust me, but I need you to believe that I'm not going to let you down. Whatever happens with this case, I'll see it through." "Why?" I asked. "Why are you really doing this?" Carter was quiet for a long moment, staring into his tea. "Because 8 years ago someone very important to me was struggling. They reached out, asked if I could help them escape a bad situation. I was in the middle of closing a business deal, thought it could wait a few days. It couldn't. By the time I got there, they were dead, murdered by the person they were trying to escape from." His voice was hollow, haunting. "So now, when someone asks for help, especially a child who shouldn't have to beg strangers for protection, I don't say no. I can't say no." The weight of his confession pressed down on me. "Carter, that wasn't your fault. You couldn't have known." "Yes, I could have," he interrupted harshly. "They told me it was urgent. They told me they were scared. I chose business over their safety and they paid the price. So now I choose differently." We sat in silence, the heaviness of his past filling the space between us. Finally, I reached over and placed my hand on his arm. "Whoever they were, I'm sure they wouldn't want you torturing yourself like this." Carter looked at my hand, then at my face. "Maybe not, but I do it anyway." He stood up carefully. "It's late. You should rest. Tomorrow we start making this look real." I went to my room but couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Carter's pain, about the person he'd lost. This wasn't just about helping a stranger. This was about redemption, about trying to save someone when he couldn't save whoever mattered most to him. And I was letting him do it because I was desperate. Was that fair to either of us? Around midnight, I got up to get water and saw light coming from the living room. I peeked around the corner and saw Carter sitting on the couch, still awake, staring at nothing. The exhaustion on his face was profound. He looked like a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. I stepped back before he could see me, but the image stayed with me. This man, with all his strength and resources, was just as broken as I was, just in different ways, and now our broken pieces were trying to fit together to create something whole. I just hoped we wouldn't cut each other to shreds in the process. As I lay back in my bed, I realized I hadn't even asked who the person was that he'd lost. A friend? A lover? Family? The mystery of Carter deepened with every interaction, and I was beginning to understand that getting close to him meant accepting that some shadows never fully disappear. 2 weeks passed in a rhythm that felt increasingly normal. Carter had essentially moved in, though he maintained the pretense of the couch being his space. But I'd wake up some mornings to find him already in the kitchen making breakfast, or I'd come home from job interviews to find him helping Eric with homework. The children had stopped calling him Uncle Carter and started just using Carter, which somehow felt more intimate, more real. One afternoon, I came back from a particularly brutal interview to find Carter on the balcony, phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and sharp. "I don't care what excuses you have. The shipment was supposed to arrive Tuesday. Fix it, or I'll find someone who can." He ended the call and noticed me watching. His expression shifted immediately, softening. "How did it go?" I shook my head. "They wanted someone with more recent experience. Apparently, being unemployed for 2 months is a red flag." I tried to keep the bitterness out of my voice but failed. Carter pocketed his phone and came inside. "We need to address that. Marcus said the court will look favorably on employment, even part-time." "I'm trying, Carter. It's not night jobs are just falling from the sky." The frustration of the day boiled over. Maybe if I had your mysterious connections, I could just solve all my problems with a phone call. The words came out harsher than I intended. Carter's jaw tightened. You think my life is easy? You think the work I do doesn't have consequences? I don't know what your work is. You won't tell me anything real about yourself. The argument hung between us, sharp and unexpected. Carter turned away, hands gripping the balcony railing. When he spoke again, his voice was controlled. I work in logistics, moving goods that need to get from one place to another without official channels. Sometimes those goods are legal but complicated. Sometimes they're not legal at all. I coordinate, I problem solve, and I make sure everyone gets paid. That's what I do, Jaden. That's how I can afford to help you. The honesty shocked me into silence. You're a smuggler? I prefer alternative supply chain manager. But yes, essentially, I should have been horrified. Should have told him to leave immediately. Instead, I found myself asking, is it dangerous? Carter turned back to face me. Sometimes. But I'm very good at what I do and I'm very careful about who I work with. Could you go to prison? If I'm caught, yes, but I won't be caught. His confidence should have been arrogant, but instead it was just matter of fact. Why do you do it? With your intelligence and skills, you could do anything legal. Carter smiled, but it was bitter. Legal work doesn't pay enough to assuage my guilt, and the people I help, they're not criminals, Jaden. They're desperate people who need things the system won't give them. Medicine from other countries, documents for refugees, sometimes just a way out of impossible situations. The complexity of who Carter was kept unfolding in ways I hadn't expected. So you're a criminal with a conscience? I'm a man who learned too late that following rules doesn't guarantee good outcomes. Sometimes you have to work around the system to actually help people. He moved close. Does it change things? Knowing what I do? I considered the question seriously. It should make me ask you to leave. But honestly, Carter, you've been more honest with me in 2 weeks than Tristan was in 3 years. At least I know what I'm dealing with. Do you? Carter challenged. Because there are parts of my life you don't see. Phone calls I can't tell you about. Meetings I can't explain. Money that comes from places you don't want to know about. Then why tell me any of it? 'Cause you deserve to know who you're trusting with your children's future. And because I'm tired of hiding. The admission hung heavy between us. Before I could respond, Eric called from inside. Jaden. Carter. Come see what Leo made. The moment broke, but something had shifted between us. That evening after the children were asleep, Carter pulled out a folder. Marcus needs us to take some photos. Ones that look more intimate, more established as a couple. He spread several example images on the coffee table. Couples cooking together, sitting close while watching TV. Casual touches and embraces. These feel invasive, I said, looking at pictures of strangers living their real lives. They're necessary. The court investigator will look at social media, at any public records. We need a digital footprint that supports our story. Carter set up his phone on a makeshift stand. Let's start simple. Just sitting together on the couch, looking at something on a tablet like we're planning something. I sat beside him, hyper-aware of the warmth of his body. He angled the tablet and pulled up what looked like vacation destinations. Pretend we're planning a family trip, he instructed. His arms settled around my shoulders, casual but possessive. The camera clicked. Look at me like I just said something funny, Carter said. I turned and he was smiling at me in a way that made my stomach flip. The smile reached his eyes, genuine and warm. I laughed without meaning to, surprised by this softer side of him. More clicks. Now one where I'm kissing your forehead, Carter said, his voice slightly rougher. Carter, that's too much? But he'd already leaned in, his lips brushing my forehead so gently I barely felt it. Except I felt everything, the warmth of his breath, the faint scent of his cologne, the way my heart hammered against my ribs. The timer clicked several times. When he pulled back, neither of us moved. Was that okay? He asked quietly. I could only nod, not trusting my voice. We took more photos, making dinner together. Carter's hand on my waist as I stirred something on the stove. Reading on the couch, with my feet in his lap. Standing on the balcony with his arms around me from behind. Each pose felt less like acting and more like glimpsing a life we could have had. By the time we finished, I was emotionally exhausted and confused. These look good, Carter said, scrolling through the images. Natural, believable. I looked at the photos and saw a happy couple. Saw myself smiling more genuinely than I had in years. Saw Carter looking at me with something that resembled actual affection. Carter, what are we doing? I asked suddenly. He looked up from the phone. Building your case. Creating evidence. No, I mean, what are we really doing? Because those photos don't feel fake to me. Carter set the phone down carefully. Jaden, we agreed this was an arrangement. A performance. I know what we agreed. But look at those pictures and tell me that's what you see. Tell me that's still all this is to you. He stared at the images for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. No, that's not all this is anymore. But admitting that doesn't change the reality. When the case is over, I'll still be a criminal. You'll still deserve better than what I can offer. I wanted to argue, but Eric called out from his room, having a bad dream. I went to comfort him, and when I came back, Carter had already retreated to the couch. The moment closed. But as I lay in bed that night, I kept thinking about those photos, about the way Carter had looked at me, about how the line between fake and real had become impossible to see, and I wondered if that had been the danger all along. Not Tristan, not the court case, but the possibility of falling for someone I was only supposed to be pretending with. The morning of the preliminary custody hearing arrived with gray skies and my nerves in tatters. I'd been awake since 4, running through every possible question the judge might ask, every way Tristan's lawyer might attack my credibility. Carter found me in the kitchen at 5:30, staring at a cup of coffee I'd forgotten to drink. You need to eat something, he said, already pulling out eggs and bread. I can't, I'll just throw it up. Then you need to at least pretend to eat so you don't pass out in court. His practicality cut through my anxiety slightly. He made toast and eggs, sitting across from me at the small table. Listen to me, Jaden. Marcus is excellent at what he does. The evidence we've gathered is solid. You're going to get through this. What if they see through us? What if the judge asks something we haven't prepared for? Carter reached across and took my hand. Then we handle it together. That's what partners do. The word partners sent a flutter through my chest. When had that shifted from pretense to something that felt true? We arrived at the courthouse an hour early. Marcus met us outside, his expression confident. I've reviewed Tristan's filing again. His case is weak, all emotion, no substance. Our strategy is to stay calm, factual, and let the evidence speak. Inside the courtroom, I saw Tristan for the first time since the parking lot incident. He looked cleaner, sober, dressed in an expensive suit his family had clearly bought for him. His lawyer was a sharp-faced woman who looked like she enjoyed destroying people. When Tristan's eyes found mine, the hatred there made me flinch. Carter's hand found the small of my back, steadying. The judge entered, a middle-aged woman with intelligent eyes and no-nonsense demeanor. The proceedings began with Tristan's lawyer painting me as unstable, financially irresponsible, unable to provide adequately for Eric and Leo. Each accusation felt like a physical blow. Then it was our turn. Marcus presented employment records showing Carter's income, rental agreements showing his residence at my address, photos of our relationship spanning weeks. He called our downstairs neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who testified she'd seen Carter coming and going regularly, helping with groceries, playing with the children in the courtyard. But then Tristan's lawyer stood up for cross-examination. Mrs. Chen, when did you first see Mr. Mills at the residence? About 3 weeks ago, I think. 3 weeks? And before that? I'd never seen him. The lawyer turned to the judge with a predatory smile. 3 weeks? Your Honor, this supposed long-term relationship materialized exactly when Mr. Jaden needed it most for this custody case. How convenient. My stomach dropped. We'd been so careful with documentation, but we couldn't fake the timeline. Marcus objected. Your Honor, the length of their relationship isn't on trial here. What matters is the current stability of the home environment. The judge considered this. Counselor, I'll allow it, but keep it relevant. Tristan's lawyer continued. Mr. Mills, how long have you known Jaden? Carter stood calmly. We met approximately 3 weeks ago. A murmur went through the courtroom. The lawyer pounced. 3 weeks, and you've moved in. taken on financial responsibility for 2 children who aren't yours, inserted yourself into a custody battle. Why? Carter's gray eyes fixed on the lawyer with an intensity that made even her pause. Because 3 weeks ago I watched a terrified child beg a stranger for help protecting his father from an abusive ex-partner. I watched that father, Jaden, barely holding himself together while trying to shield 2 innocent children from trauma and fear. In my life I've learned that the length of time you know someone matters less than the depth of commitment you're willing to make. I've known Jaden for 3 weeks, but I know enough to see someone worth fighting for, someone worthy of stability and safety. So yes, I moved quickly, because that's what the situation required. The courtroom was completely silent. Even Tristan's lawyer seemed momentarily thrown. Carter continued, his voice steady but carrying emotion that felt devastatingly real. Your Honor, I'm not Eric and Leo's biological father, and I'm not trying to be that. I am someone who believes children deserve to grow up without fear. Jaden has given them that safety, love, consistency despite overwhelming obstacles. All I'm doing is providing the resources so he can continue doing what he's already been doing successfully for years. The judge studied Carter for a long moment. Mr. Mills, you understand this court must consider the children's best interests above all else. I do, Your Honor, and I believe those best interests are served by keeping them with the parent who has consistently prioritized their well-being over everything else, including his own pride. The judge made notes, her expression unreadable. We'll take a brief recess. I want to review all submitted evidence before making any preliminary determination. In the hallway during recess, I couldn't stop shaking. They know it's fake. The timeline gave us away. Marcus shook his head. Actually, Carter's testimony helped us. He didn't lie about the timeline, but he reframed it as a strength rather than weakness. Judges appreciate honesty, even when it's not convenient. Carter was standing slightly apart, staring out the window. I walked over to him. What you said in there about commitment and worth fighting for. I meant it, he said quietly, not looking at me. All of it. Before I could respond, we were called back in. The judge looked at all of us. I've reviewed the evidence and heard testimony from both sides. Mr. Tristan, your concerns about financial stability are noted, but Mr. Jaden has clearly addressed those issues. Your claims of emotional instability lack supporting evidence, while Mr. Jaden has demonstrated a stable support system. She turned to me. Mr. Jaden, I'm not making a final custody determination today. However, I am denying Mr. Tristan's request for emergency custody transfer. The children will remain in your care pending the final hearing in 6 weeks. Relief crashed over me, so powerfully I thought my legs would give out. Carter's hand gripped my elbow, holding me steady. Tristan's face went purple with rage. This is ridiculous. He's lying about everything. That relationship is fake. The judge's expression hardened. Mr. Tristan, I suggest you control yourself in my courtroom. Outbursts will not help your case. His lawyer pulled him down into his seat, whispering urgently. The judge dismissed us, and somehow I made it out of the courtroom without collapsing. Outside, Marcus was pleased. That went better than expected. The judge is clearly sympathetic to your position. Now we have 6 weeks to solidify everything before the final hearing. He left to file some paperwork, leaving Carter and me alone. I turned to him, emotions overwhelming me. You saved us in there. What you said was the truth, Carter interrupted. Maybe I should have realized that sooner. Realized what? He looked at me directly, and the vulnerability in his gray eyes took my breath away. That this stopped being pretend the moment I carried your sleeping children into your apartment. Maybe even before that. I've been lying to myself, Jaden, telling myself I was just helping out, just making things right. But the truth is I care about you, about Eric and Leah, more than I've cared about anyone in a very long time. My heart was racing. Carter, you don't have to say anything. I know this complicates things. I know I'm not the kind of man you should be involved with. Criminal record waiting to happen, emotional baggage, dangerous work. You deserve someone stable and safe. What if I don't want safe? The words came out before I could stop them. What if I want you? Carter's eyes widened slightly. Jaden, don't say that, unless you mean it. Because if you mean it, everything changes. I mean it, I said, surprised by how certain I felt. I'm terrified and confused, and this is probably the worst timing possible. But I mean it, this isn't fake for me anymore either. We stood there in the courthouse hallway, people moving around us, and Carter slowly reached out to cup my face with one hand. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone. We should probably wait until after the case is over. Keep things uncomplicated. Probably, I agreed. But neither of us moved away. Jaden, if we do this, if we make this real, you need to understand what you're signing up for. My work won't change. The danger won't disappear. I can't promise you a normal life. I don't need normal. I just need honest. Carter smiled then, genuinely, and it transformed his entire face. Honest I can do. The drive home was quiet but comfortable. When we arrived at the apartment, Eric and Leo were with Mrs. Chen, who'd agreed to watch them during the hearing. We picked them up, and Eric immediately asked, "Did we win? Can we stay with you, Jaden?" "We get to stay together," I confirmed, pulling him into a hug. "For now and for always." Leo hugged Carter's legs. "Did you help?" Carter lifted him up. "I tried my best, buddy." "You're a good helper," Leo said seriously. "You should stay forever." Eric nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, you're already like our other dad anyway." The innocence of their acceptance made my throat tight. Carter set Leo down carefully. "Well, I'm not going anywhere anytime soon." That evening, after the children were finally asleep, exhausted from excitement, Carter and I found ourselves on the balcony again. This had become our space for real conversations. 6 weeks until the final hearing. I said, "A lot can happen in 6 weeks." Carter nodded. "Last time, 6 weeks ago, I was a different person living a different life. Do you regret it? Getting involved in all this?" "No," he said immediately. "Whatever happens, I don't regret meeting you." "Meeting them," he gestured toward where the children slept. "Even if it's complicated and messy and possibly insane." I laughed softly. "It's definitely all of those things." We stood in comfortable silence, shoulders touching. "Carter, what happens after? If we win the case, if everything works out, what then?" "Then we figure it out," he said simply. "Together, if that's what you want." "It is," I said. "It terrifies me, but it is." Carter turned to face me fully, taking both my hands in his. "I can't promise I'll always make the right choices. I can't promise my past won't catch up with me. But I can promise I'll always choose you and those kids over everything else." That's a promise I know I can keep. Standing there in the dim light with Carter's hands warm around mine, I realized we'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross. This wasn't an arrangement anymore. This wasn't pretend. This was real, messy, complicated, and more terrifying than anything I'd ever done. But it was also the most right thing I'd felt in years. The week following the court hearing felt like living in a dream. Carter and I had crossed some invisible threshold, and while we hadn't discussed exactly what our relationship was, there was a new easiness between us. He'd stopped sleeping on the couch, but we maintained separate sides of the bed with a respectful distance. Sometimes I'd wake in the night to find that distance had closed, his arm draped over my waist, my back pressed against his chest. Neither of us acknowledged it in the morning, but neither of us pulled away either. But reality has a way of shattering peaceful moments. It started with Carter receiving more phone calls than usual. He'd step outside or into the bathroom, his voice too low to hear but his body language increasingly tense. On Wednesday evening, I found him on the balcony at 2 in the morning, staring at his phone with an expression of deep concern. "Can't sleep?" I asked, joining him. He startled slightly. "Just work issues. Nothing you need to worry about." "Carter, we're past that. If something's wrong, I want to know." He was quiet for a long moment, then sighed. "There's a situation developing with one of my business partners. Someone who's becoming unreliable, making dangerous choices. I'm trying to extract myself from that particular arrangement. But it's complicated." "Dangerous how?" "The kind where people could get hurt if things go wrong. The kind where law enforcement might get involved." His honesty was both reassuring and terrifying. "Could it affect the custody case? If your business problems become legal problems?" "I'm being careful to make sure that doesn't happen. But yes, it's a risk I'm aware of." The next afternoon, things escalated. Carter had gone out to handle something he wouldn't specify, promising to return by dinner. 6 o'clock came and went. Then 7. By 8 I was pacing the apartment, calling his phone repeatedly with no answer. Eric and Leo sensed my anxiety, growing quiet and worried. "Is Carter okay?" Eric asked. "I'm sure he's fine," I said, trying to sound convinced. "He probably just got held up." But my imagination was running wild with possibilities. Arrests, violence, betrayal. At 9 o'clock, Carter's phone finally rang. But it wasn't Carter. "Is this Jaden?" an unfamiliar male voice asked. My blood turned cold. "Yes. Who is this? Where's Carter?" "Carter's been detained. There was an incident at a warehouse. Police are involved. He told me to call you, tell you not to worry, and that Marcus is handling everything." The man hung up before I could ask anything else. Detained. Police. The words echoed in my head. This was what I'd feared. Carter's dangerous world crashing into our fragile stability. I called Marcus immediately. He answered on the second ring. "Jaden, I was about to call you. Carter's fine. He's not under arrest. There was a situation at a business location. Someone got hurt, and police are questioning everyone present. He's cooperating fully and should be released within a few hours." "Someone got hurt? How badly?" "I don't have details yet, but Carter wasn't involved in whatever altercation occurred. He's simply a witness." I wanted to believe that, but the timing was terrible. If this came out before our final custody hearing, I spent the next 3 hours in agony, trying to keep the children calm while my mind raced through worst-case scenarios. Finally, at midnight, I heard the security system beep. Carter came through the door looking exhausted and disheveled, his shirt untucked, a bruise forming along his jawline. "What happened?" I demanded. "Are you hurt? What did the police say?" He held up his hands. "I'm fine. The situation has been handled. No charges are being filed against anyone. It's over." But his eyes told a different story. After I checked on the sleeping children, I found Carter in the bathroom, examining the bruise on his face. "Tell me what really happened." He met my eyes in the mirror. "One of my business associates decided to rob the warehouse we were meeting at. Things got violent. I had to intervene to prevent someone from being seriously hurt or killed. Police came, questioned everyone, but the warehouse owner isn't pressing charges and everyone's story matched. So we all walked away. You could have been arrested. You could have been hurt worse than a bruise, but I wasn't. Carter, this can't keep happening. What if next time you're not so lucky? What if next time it affects the custody case?" My voice was rising with fear and frustration. "What if Tristan finds out about this and uses it against us?" Carter turned to face me directly. "Then we deal with it, Jaden. I told you from the beginning what my life was like. I can't change that overnight. I'm not asking you to change overnight. I'm asking you to be careful. To think about Eric and Leo and what could happen to them if you get arrested or worse." The argument hung between us, sharp and painful. "You think I'm not thinking about them?" Carter's voice was low but intense. "You think I don't lie awake at night terrified that my past will destroy their future? I'm trying, Jaden. I'm extracting myself from the dangerous connections, cleaning up my business, but it takes time. Time we might not have. The final hearing is in 5 weeks. I know exactly how long we have," Carter said, "and I'm doing everything I can to make sure my problems don't become yours." We stood in angry, hurt silence. Finally, Carter's shoulders sagged. "Maybe you were right before. Maybe I should leave. Find somewhere else to stay until the hearing. Keep my complications away from you and the kids." The suggestion felt like a punch to the gut. "Is that what you want?" "No," he admitted. "But maybe it's what's best. Don't I get a say in what's best for my own life?" I demanded. "This isn't just about you and your guilt and your need to protect everyone. I'm an adult who gets to make choices, even risky ones." Carter looked at me with surprise. "So what are you choosing?" "I'm choosing to trust you, to believe you when you say you're trying to fix things, to accept that life is messy and tainted and sometimes dangerous, but that doesn't mean we give up." I moved closer. "But I'm also choosing to be honest with you. That scared me tonight, Carter. Not knowing where you were, if you were safe. The children were worried. I was terrified. If we're really doing this, if this is real, then I need you to communicate better. Even if you can't tell me everything, tell me something. He reached out and pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly. I'm sorry. You're right. I should have found a way to let you know what was happening. Yes, you should have. But I held him just as tightly, relief overwhelming now that he was safe. We stood like that for a long moment, the argument diffusing into understanding. This isn't going to be easy, Carter said quietly. Building something real while dealing with my past and your present, and everyone's uncertain future. Nothing worthwhile ever is, I replied. The next few days were tense but better. Carter kept me informed about his whereabouts. Even if he couldn't always explain what he was doing, he started bringing me into decisions about our strategy for the final custody hearing. It felt like we were becoming actual partners rather than two people playing roles. On Sunday, exactly 3 weeks after Carter had first entered our lives, we took Eric and Leo to the same park where this had all begun. Watching Carter push Leo on the swings while Eric ran circles around them, I was struck by how natural it all looked now. He really loves them, Mrs. Chen said. She'd come to the park with her grandchildren and spotted us. And they love him. Yes, I agreed, watching Carter catch Eric mid-jump and swing him around while both of them laughed. They really do. And you? Miss Chen asked with the bluntness of someone who'd lived long enough to dispense with subtlety. Do you love him? I watched Carter set Eric down and immediately get tackled by both boys in a tickle attack. Watched the way his usually guarded expression opened into pure joy. Yes, I admit it. I think I do. That evening, after the children were asleep, Carter and I found ourselves in that familiar space on the balcony. I have something to tell you, he said, sounding nervous. The warehouse incident. It was actually a setup, someone from my past trying to drag me back into situations I've been avoiding. But I've handled it now, cut all ties with that entire network. It means less income for a while, but it also means less risk. The weight of what he was saying settled over me. You're getting out of the illegal work. Mostly. I can't go completely legitimate overnight. But I'm transitioning to legal consulting. It'll take time and money will be tighter. But yeah, I'm getting out. Because of us? Because of me, he corrected. I've been looking for a reason to change for years. You and the kids gave me that reason. But the choice is mine. I didn't know what to say, so I just took his hand. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights. Whatever happens at the final hearing, Carter said eventually, I want you to know this has been real for me. All of it. The fear, the complications, the joy. All real. For me too, I said. And sitting there with Carter's hand warm in mine, I realized that we'd built something worth fighting for. Not perfect. Not easy. But absolutely worth it.